Walking along a path at the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road toward the Anselm Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and whether celebrity streamers are ruining RPG gaming. In a corner by the fire are 4 people. One of them is wondering if RPG is a slightly incorrect acronym for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And that's me, Evangeline Denmark. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. The Anselm Society is a coalition of churches across the Front Range of Colorado dedicated to one simple goal, a renaissance of the Christian imagination. To find out more about the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And while you're there, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You may have noticed that I'm not your usual host. Never fear, Matt Mellema is elsewhere in the city, tending to occasional superhero duties that arise. I guess he's been summoned by the Matt signal. Co-hosting with me today is Mandy Haug.
Hello.
And our listeners might not know, but we are recording just a couple weeks before Christmas. So, Mandy, I have a very specific question for you.
Oh, dear.
I need to know what you got your mom for Christmas.
Oh, I am so proud of what I got my mom for Christmas. My mother is obsessed with chickens. So whatever we get her, if it's a stuffed chicken or a chicken book or whatever. But I don't even remember how I found this. But apparently people who think their dishwasher is just an eyesore, they make magnets that are dishwasher size that you can put on the dishwasher to make it more aesthetically pleasing. So I found a magnet for my mother for her dishwasher that looks like chickens peeking out of a chicken coop. So it has like the chicken wire and everything. I'm showing it to Evangeline now.
Oh, okay.
So it looks like they're like peeking out. So that is what her dishwasher will look like, a chicken coop with curious chickens, and she will be raving about it for weeks. What did you get your mother?
That is a pretty cool gift. It kind of reminds me of the fluffy toilet seats in the 80s, but better.
Yeah, much better
than the fluffy toilet seats of the 80s.
And not linty.
Yes. Yeah. Well, moms are hard to buy for. That's why I asked. I never can figure out what to buy.
Well, my mom's actually not that hard to buy for because she gets whatever she likes, she's obsessed with. So chickens, hedgehogs.
That helps.
Anything with golf, and you're good.
I guess my mom's obsessed with bunnies.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
That's a good gift idea.
Do not get her a bunny.
Get her a male and female bunny, and then you'll never have to get her. That is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes. Her husband would never speak to us again.
Yeah.
Okay, also joining us is my husband, Corey Denmark, who is handling the tech side of things and offering occasional comments and providing visual inspiration for me. So I have an important question for you. What did you get me for Christmas?
I call foul.
Well, having asked you what you want for Christmas and you sending me a big list, you should have a pretty good idea.
So something on the list.
Something
Why
on the
not
list.
the whole list?
Well done.
Come on.
Wait a minute. I like Mandy's most of the list. Okay.
All right.
Well done.
Good job.
I'm no rookie.
We've been married 23 years?
Hey, you know what?
You're not a rookie.
Tomorrow is my anniversary with my husband, 29.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Very nice.
If we live till tomorrow.
Well, that's grim.
So it's hoping.
You know.
Okay, so we're keeping it in the family. Our guest today is my brother, Dr. John Case Tompkins, PhD, enormous nerd, and co-host of the podcast RPG Review Board. Case, welcome to the Anselm podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So we've been having an ongoing discussion lately, and really, I guess, since we were teenagers.
I have stories.
So, yes. If I were to summarize your side of the conversation, it would be something like RPGs are awesome.
Pretty much.
And then to summarize my side of the conversation, it would just be, I don't get it.
I don't get it. Sure.
So we thought that we would bring this topic on the podcast and hash it out with Mandy, who is also kind of in my camp, and Corey, who is somewhere in the middle, I would say.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be discussing today. That's our topic.
Yay.
RPGs, awesome or
not?
Or not.
Well, and I think RPGs are becoming more and more ubiquitous, obviously, as the result of the development of video games as a pastime that people do, but it's also really exploded in popularity recently for a number of reasons. But yeah, I run a podcast that is in the business of inviting people to play different RPGs. And so I think it might be interesting to have this conversation with people who are not as dedicated as I am. Yeah.
The unconvinced.
The skeptical.
Yes.
Well, and this seems to be the experience that I have with a lot of people, is that I get people who, you get them into it and they just, even if they leave it, as in they play for a while and then maybe life gets in the way, they're always willing to come back, right? And then I meet other people, like my sister.
And me. I know we just met, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Who sort of come into it and can see the enthusiasm. So for you, it's your boys. For you, it's your husband.
Yes.
And it's like, this thing is something that gives them a lot of joy. It must be fun. They must do it for a reason.
So what is wrong with me?
Yeah. But I want to take, for a moment here, I want to take my kind of enthusiast hat off, because, like, I am already convinced.
Yes.
I have been baptized in the faith of RPGs. Yes. I always carry tracks in the form of weird dice.
Now, the dice,
That's
I
a
will
whole
admit,
other
the
thing.
dice are quite pretty and interesting.
Oh, see, to me, they give me a headache because I'm like, how many sides is that? I don't know.
Okay.
Well,
So I have to sit
think-
there and count it, and then I count it wrong.
Yeah, which ideal platonic solid am I supposed to be using for this particular thing?
Like, if they would color code, if the 4-sided die were pink.
We're always pink.
Maybe not pink.
We're always
Maybe.
pink. Like every one on all the tables was pink all the time.
There you
You're like,
go.
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is exactly, this is the conversation I want to have.
You have to make it pretty.
Right. Well, okay. So let's start with just the kind of, it is in the holiday time, so let's do a Festivus airing of the grievances. Where you tell me what is aggravating about RPGs.
Okay.
You go first, sis, because you're
Okay.
standing next to me.
Okay. You're handed a sheet of paper and you have to fill in all these blanks and you have no idea. I mean, this is not like creating a character for me as a writer, and probably for Mandy. They show up in your head, they start talking to you, you have this idea of them, but it does not happen with a sheet of paper in this way. Now, I know some people actually do have a whole framework and questions that they fill out about their characters. That's never been the way that I've done it. How about you?
No, not really. I tried it that way. Like, what do they carry in their pocket?
Exactly.
Things like that, which can be helpful.
What is their favorite song?
Right. And when
Yeah.
I taught creative writing, that can be very useful, just to help the kids think of the characters as a real person or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, for me, my characters start as a, what if a person were in this scenario? What kind of person would that person be? And they talk to me, and
I bet Matt uses those character questions.
I bet he does.
He's such an outliner.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so if I can, I want to kind of rephrase this and make sure I've kind of got it here. So your experience then with the RPG and why you kind of maybe bounce off of it a little bit is that the first thing you're invited to do is to make a character, and you know that process, but you look at the thing that you're invited to do, which is, here's an Excel spreadsheet.
Yes.
You're gonna fill out some form,
I'm
fill out
allergic
some
to
numbers,
Excel.
put numbers in here. There'll be some math, and you have to right. And so you're like, okay, I know what creating a character is, and this is not it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Ding.
Yes.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well,
Yeah, it's the framework. It's
It's
like
the-
you can create, but only in this framework.
only in this framework. Yeah, Corey, because I know you like other types of games. What is it about RPGs that sort of like it's not the first thing? Because again, enthusiast hat briefly on here. I would play RPGs above anything else. Hat back off. Okay, go ahead.
So, When I first started playing RPGs, the character creation thing was a little bit daunting, but it was fun because you can kind of create your own little superhero or whatever it is you want to do. Put a personality to it and have fun building up their backstory and why they act the way they act.
Yeah.
What was a little bit more daunting than that was when you started getting into the classes, especially like the magic classes and things, and goes exponentially more options. And during gameplay, how do I play this?
Right.
What's going to be an effective offense or defense or whatever?
Sure.
And then it took me a little while with the role-playing part of it when you were in the questing portions of of a campaign. Yeah. It was a little bit awkward to hold a dialogue, a pretend dialogue with a bunch of other geeks at the same table.
Right. The pretend aspect.
Yes. And I was like, you kind of really have to get into it if you want to really...
Yes. Okay. So let me, again, I'm just going to try and rephrase this and see if I've got it. So that kind of steep upscale learning curve in rules without any obvious benefit or obvious, like in a game, like I play a video game or even like a board game and it's like, okay, here are my options. I could do this or this or this. And you're sort of looking at a board, you're looking at a map, whatever, and you're saying, okay, I could go over here and do this. That would gain me this, right? And then the other aspect is the kind of, if I'm getting this right, like, is this theater? Am I supposed to do funny voices?
That's a good question for Mandy, because Mandy is a theater person. So do you like that part, the dialogue?
Role play, yes.
Yeah, role play. Oh,
that's the word.
Role-playing game.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
So for us, this is so new for us because this was something, Peter and I are empty nesters. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I got to do something to, I don't know, fill our empty time. No. So
there's nothing like making tons of imaginary children.
There's nothing. Yeah, there we go.
We are children.
Yeah.
Well, I already have all the animals, but they weren't enough. Anyway, so I was like, I'll just buy this starter kit for him.
Yeah.
And I'll submit to playing this game just for him.
For the good of our marriage.
For the good of our marriage to make him
roll this
okay, but I had no idea.
Yeah.
So then he's like, okay, here are these forms. You fill them out, and I'm like, well, what character are you? And he's like, no, I'm the dungeon master. And I'm like, what? And so I think the inherent issue that we have is it's all me being all the people. And I mean, I do talk to myself, but not like that. And we've only played it once so far. Yeah. So it's daunting. And I'm like, so, I mean, we killed the goblins.
Well, hey,
but,
I mean, someone had to get it done.
Yeah. So I enjoyed naming the characters. Sure. I enjoyed looking at the little map.
Sure.
The lexicon, I think, is the biggest problem for me. I'm like, what does that mean? And, and that's frustrating for me because I love words. And for me to feel ignorant, it's not fun.
Well, yeah, there's an awful lot of terminology that goes into these. Okay, so I would say then for what you're saying, there seems to be a disconnect between what feels to be a very creative endeavor.
Right.
And what feels like a very work-intensive endeavor.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so let me... I'm going to keep my enthusiast hat off for just a little bit longer.
That's hard for you, I can tell.
It is really hard for me. But I want to take an example from a metaphor that I hope will kind of help us really grapple with this issue, right? So I think that RPGs are a kind of art. Now, I'm not really sure what that kind of art is. It's really new. It hasn't even been around for 50 years, so we don't really know what kind of an art it is. It's a new form. But if it is a kind of art, and that's up in the air, like many arts, you sort of have to be brought into it in the right way.
Okay.
So, for instance, I do not like opera. Mm-hmm. I don't get it. It does not sound good to me. Now, to quote C.S. Lewis, it very well may be that is because I stand outside the Tao about opera. Mm-hmm. I think it was like Wilde or somebody who said that opera is our most expensive kind of noise. And that's,
Sounds like Oscar Wilde.
and that's maybe a Swinburne, but that's sort of how I feel about it. Like, it doesn't sound good to me. I don't get it. I've tried to watch opera. I've tried to listen to opera, and just don't get it. But I am confident that if I had somebody, the right person who was a true opera fan, guide me into it and say, listen to this, look at this, see what's going on here, I probably could find a way to love it.
To appreciate it minimum.
Right. But I've just never met that person.
Okay.
Right?
Well, it's not me. Right.
Well, there you go. Right. And then there are bunches of arts like that, right? And that I just don't get it. I've never met the person who could guide me into it. And I think, it's my view, that RPGs are the sort of thing that you need, not necessarily the right person, although that helps. It's nice to have somebody who's like, do this with me, it'll be fun, I promise. But they can often be liars. Because again, they're inside it, not outside it. Right? And so I think that the more apt metaphor might be the experience that I'm sure a lot of us have had of the number of times I have met kids or people who say, I wasn't a reader until X. Right? I didn't like books, but then I read whatever.
See, now you're speaking my language, because I was a high school English teacher, and that was my favorite challenge. I'm like, oh, you say you don't like reading. Wow.
But I got a book for you.
Exactly.
But it's never the same one. Like, so I had a young man in my class this last semester who, for him, the thing that got him reading was Hemingway.
That's unusual. We hang around each other.
Yeah, Hemingway.
Yeah, that didn't.
I like Hemingway, but I didn't like him when I was young.
It's an acquired taste.
I didn't like him when I was young.
Yeah.
I liked him when I got older. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. This is actually the second time that I've had someone in my class who is a confessed Hemingway fan. and I do like
branded,
not a closet Hemingway fan.
I was about to say that he's wearing the Scarlet H.
Yeah. I don't, I don't take my students' reading habits into account usually.
You don't grade them on because they're reading anime, they get an F.
Well, you teach
manga.
College,
sorry, not anime.
Yes.
Sorry, nerds.
Yeah, see, teaching college, you can be like, I don't care if you like it.
Yeah.
But teaching high school, I want to make sure I don't leave a bad taste in their mouth.
But both of these people, engineers.
Oh.
So I wonder if there's something about Hemingway that appeals to the engineering mind. I don't know.
Oh.
But taking that metaphor, I think that it will take the right game to get you in.
Okay.
Much in the way that the right book would get you into reading. But even then, it's entirely possible that I would have somebody explain all of opera to me and like really...
Right.
And I may be like, it's just...
Still don't get it.
It's not for me, right?
Yeah.
So...
But there may be other operas.
Right, opera is not all one.
It's not all the same, just like books are not all the same, So maybe that another one does appeal to you.
Right.
So the metaphor holds,
right.
I think.
And I think if you have ever had that experience of dealing with somebody who is not a reader, and you're like, but come on.
Yes.
There is so much here. It's so rich.
Yep.
Please come enjoy this art with me the way that is the experience that people who play RPGs who are into it have all the time.
Okay.
And it's something where it's like this thing, I mean, I've been playing them for a long time. This thing, I've had many frustrating sessions, many, games that didn't end well. Just the same way that you pick up a book and get halfway through and you're like, I can't do it. I don't. It's not, and it's always bad when it's something you're supposed to love.
Yes.
Everyone else loves this book. What's wrong with me?
Yeah. Yes.
But I think that for those of us who do this, there is those times that it was great. There's any number of times when I have left an RPG game and driven home, and the whole way home, my brain was just on fire for like, what happened? okay, what's going to happen next? And what about what's going on over there? And what about over there? And so it's such an immense boon to the imagination and a rich sort of field for your brain to play around in and for you to have these interactions. Because the other thing about it is that it is the only interactive medium for imagination that I know of. Like,
Oh, that's true.
reading a book is lonely fun.
Right. Well, I guess
guess-
going to a concert, but then
You're
you're not even.
passive.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
I mean, occasionally we do collaborative art projects in the guild.
Right.
And they always are very rewarding.
Right.
Because it's not something you normally get to do.
right, but then that's
unusual.
not a universally available, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm just, yeah.
Right.
It isn't
No, I
available
agree with
to
you,
most
but I'm
people.
drawing.
But also, I'm thinking of, my youngest who loves theater and performing arts and marching band, and how that is collaborative creation
Right.
in a way, and
Well,
just how
yeah.
exciting it is to get to be part of a team and
If you
do
have-
something creative.
Yeah. If you
Yeah.
have ever spent really serious time around a jam band,
yeah.
like not like watching a jam band, but being on stage or in the presence of them when they practice, like that collaboration, you can see how it infuses them and strengthens them, and it like oh man, what you were doing with that bass line is amazing, and
I like this metaphor because
Yeah.
we actually know a really freakishly talented bassist and so I used to be
Right.
at least adjacent enough that I would see him jam.
Yeah.
And so this role-playing games are like jamming a story.
Like jazz freestyling.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the thing is
but
it's-
there's dice.
But there's dice. So it is not, one of the other metaphors I've heard of RPGs is it is not a game, it is a do-it-yourself game kit. So one of the reasons it is so challenging, I think, for people who walk into it is that there is this, if I sit down to play, I don't know, Settlers of Catan, and it's like, okay, it's my turn, I can buy stuff, or I can do this. I got to roll my dice, and I got to see what I can afford. My turn is done. I'm moving over.
Right.
Now it's somebody else's turn. In role-playing games, there is no turn order, except when you're in combat. There is no set list of things you can do. There is no game path. Like, it's not like Candyland where it's like, okay, once I get to the
thank
end,
goodness.
the game is done, right? Theoretically, RPGs never end, in the same way.
Never-ending story.
Right.
I've never stuck with one that long.
Well,
But-
no, but
know whether or not
in
they
the same way that the Grateful Dead used to play like hours-long single songs, because they
Wow.
would just start jamming and then just go places.
Well, that was partly because of certain...
LSD.
Yeah.
But doesn't
You're not recommending LSD for
doesn't
RPG.
No.
someone have to
No.
know where you're going, or what
Well,
the
yeah.
parameters of the story? Like I would think it would be scary as a dungeon master to think that your party will choose something that you haven't thought out, haven't planned for.
Yeah, although, so if the part of the game that can be really intimidating for people is the improv nature of it, right? So just what I was saying, there's no particular, like, I should do this now. And the dungeon master's improv job is just a bigger improv job than everyone else's, right? So your responsibility as the dungeon master is the world. You are the sub-created world. You are the person who brings into life the things that the other players see and understand. You arbitrate the rules, you answer questions, and yeah, it's a tough job, but it's also it's one of the most rewarding things on the planet. It's so good.
I suppose, just when your story world comes together and you're, things are going well and you're writing. Not that I really have any experience with that recently.
Lately, yeah.
But but I remember distantly in the past,
Distantly,
when
like
it
a
was
dream.
good. Yeah, exactly. I remember that feeling of everything clicking and just how exciting it was to have created this
Right.
to be involved in it.
And so, as a dungeon master, you're kind of letting your characters do their thing. And I know, being married to an author, sometimes your characters get out of hand, right? And then it's your responsibility to, if you can, get them back in line.
Herd the cats.
Yeah.
So if one of your characters starts going off the rails in one of your games, the dungeon master can say, "Well, a meteor just fell on you. Your character's dead."
That would be a bad dungeon master.
That would be a bad dungeon master,
It's
but
probably
it would be
good example.
more of those. Let's put some guardrails in there and guide them into the prepared story, because I think they're going to have fun with it.
Yeah.
Instead of letting them go off and
Put a fresh stumbling
Yeah,
block
which is
in front
true.
of them.
do the
if you-
Scooby-Doo thing. Let's split up and
if your characters really get off track, then you're gonna run into problems, because like chances are they're acting against their character arc or whatever, and there's a reason there's that problem. So you do have to address it.
Yeah.
I have never used a meteor, but I will keep that as an idea.
I have never used a meteor
Back
either,
pocket.
but
Yeah.
nonetheless, sometimes the dungeon master, sometimes Daddy has to regulate. So I want to get back though to something that Corey said earlier, and that was that like there's all of these classes, which is definitely true of D&D. It's not true of all games. It's true of D&D. And one of the things that is not clear from the game as it is written, and this is very difficult for modern D&D. Modern D&D doesn't do a very good job of explaining to people who have never played before what exactly is going on.
Yeah.
Because it is in some sense talking to the choir. It's like, we assume you've played a role-playing game before. Here's how our game works.
So we need an old game from like 1980.
Well, but see, here's the thing. What this game does, and most class and level games do, which I don't want to get into a lot of more terminology, is provide you with choices about how complex you want to play.
Okay.
Wizards are the most complex class in the game.
Okay.
Fighters, pretty simple. And so the idea is if you're coming in, most of the time, your first character is a fighter because it's easy. And you're like, okay, I know what to do.
Fight. I'm supposed to fight now.
It's my job is in the name. But there's also something that I think, again, it's one of these differences that might be illustrated by that experience of writing. And that is, when you are writing, you sort of know what genre you're in.
Right.
Right? I'm writing a romance. I'm writing a mystery. I'm writing, so, and that gives you guardrails for how the story is going to go. Now, you might discover halfway through, it's like, oh boy, this is a mystery, but these two characters, it's going to be romance.
really
So things can surprise you, but you sort of know what to expect, right? And one of the things that D&D specifically, and again, there are so many games out there, one of the things that D&D does that makes it difficult is that it gives you, it says, hey, this is a fantasy role-playing game. It doesn't really tell you what that means. Like, what kind of fantasy are we talking about here? What is expected in this genre? So, to give you an example, my podcast, we just put out a review of a game called Monster of the Week. And Monster of the Week is based on vaguely supernatural serial television. So,
okay.
X-Files, Buffy, Supernatural, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
We have varying degrees of skill and comfort with RPGs in our little review group, so we have different perspectives on this.
Okay.
Everybody just devoured this. And one of the reasons I think that's true is because we all watched those shows.
Oh, okay.
Right? You had to have been living under a rock to have not at least seen Buffy or X-Files at some point in the 90s, right? And so we were all working from the shared cultural framework. We all knew what to expect because it's a show about creepy crawlies and you're playing one of those, and all of the characters were, so this D&D has classes, right?
Right.
It's like, well, what is a barbarian? What's a druid? What is that, right? But if you're the chosen one, It's like, oh, okay. I know what to do.
Or the sidekick, or the best friend.
Or the best friend.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. You
You're like,
know
oh.
the roles.
Yeah,
Got
I
it.
know what to do.
Yeah,
Everyone's
the teacher, the one
Right.
with the knowledge, like
Right,
Giles.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheerleader.
The cheerleader.
Corey wants to be the cheerleader. He's always choosing the cheerleader. It's just weird. I don't know.
Well, you want that mundane that comes in at the end. It's like, what are you guys doing here?
Right.
Right.
Oh yeah, the popular girl who like is
popular girl.
always like coming in late and like, what's
Right.
going on? Yeah.
And when I get back to Indiana, we will be playing and then reviewing a game called Warmer in the Winter, which is the Hallmark holiday movie RPG.
No.
Yes.
It sounds hilarious though.
Yeah.
Like I want to be the Christmas tree farmer.
Oh,
The
that's
nosy
Right?
true.
neighbor.
The nosy
Yeah.
neighbor.
Yeah, oh,
Or
that's
the
true.
precocious child.
The older woman with a weird pet.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
true. That would be me, Winston, and me.
What, but no,
Character.
really weird, like a llama or something.
Oh,
Right.
Okay.
So again,
Porcupine.
what is happening right here, this thing right here, this is improv.
Okay.
This is what RPGs are all about. But you guys know this material.
Right.
And yes,
Okay, yeah.
I can do Hallmark Christmas movies. I know that.
Right.
I can do Buffy. I know Buffy.
Yes. And it would be
Right.
fun, and it would be, yeah.
And so I think one of the real problems with that initial step in is that you're being introduced to something for which you have no mental framework. And so it's like, hey, improv. Okay. Well, what am I? You're a snarfblat. Cool. What does this snarfblat do? What do they
Right.
like?
What do you want to do?
What do you want to do? Yeah.
Oh no,
Take a nap.
You can do anything
Yeah.
you want.
I want to take a nap. Can
Yeah.
I just take a nap?
Can I go shopping?
Yeah, make sure- yes. Here's the-
Surflats don't shop.
read this book. This chapter is just the shopping chapter. It's like
I actually know how to shop. I'm pretty good at it.
not
But
a D&D,
just
though.
cut,
Not a D&D.
not as a snarfblat.
Yeah.
Snarfblats
Okay.
need.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I need some sort of magical
They have a
accoutrement.
long list of allergens, so you have to be careful.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's a lot to be said for maybe for people who, if you want to do this thing, or at least you want to experience it because you have somebody you love for whom it is everything, then the question might be like, I'm not ready for this book. Can we do something smaller, something different,
Yeah.
something I'm familiar with? And maybe that can be my first step in.
Gateway. Your
Yeah.
gateway.
Do you
Right.
remember a
RPG.
couple of Christmases ago we played like a predetermined, I don't know how it was a Christmas or a holiday winter
Oh yeah, I remember that.
D&D game,
Yeah.
but it was kind of pre-packaged, pre-set. And that was I think you even had your character already like handed to you.
Yeah, in that
sort of?
particular one, in that one, I handed you a character sheet that was like a lottery scratch-off thing. Everything was
Yeah.
under, and then you would
Ooh.
scratch off
Yeah.
your things as you. It's like, well, I need to fight. And I'm like, well, what do you have? And then you take a coin and scratch. I'm like, oh, I got a dagger. Okay, I'm gonna try and stab this guy.
Yeah. That took the decision making and the questioning. You're like, well, I don't know what I need. What kind of weapon should I have?
Right, right.
Well, it's already there. And so that's a kind of a good
Right.
way to get
In a lot of these big
introduced.
games, it's like, hey, listen, do you want great weapon fighting or investigative journalism?
I don't know.
Would I use one
More than the other.
Like,
What's my weapon? A magnifying glass? The sun?
what do we mean?
The pen. Mightier than the sword.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by great? Like, is it just high quality? Or we're talking size? Like, great has lots of meanings. Yes. Yeah. So, I think that there's a lot to be said here for just saying, Hemingway's not my taste. Or maybe I could get into it, but can I try something else first?
Right.
And I think there's possibility there. Now, you still may decide that opera's not your thing.
Yeah.
And there's also, you've played with your children.
Yes.
That is not the experience. That is not the experience. You play with adults sometime. It's a
Yeah,
very different.
Well, I did have one campaign at work.
Okay.
We played with adults. quote unquote adults. We're professionals. We weren't children.
Yeah, people in the adult age range.
I played a ranger. There's a couple new races in D&D that one is like a sentient robot type class or race. And so I played Bender the Charlatan as a ranger, and that was Bender from Futurama.
Sure.
So I basically modeled his character off of a fictional character, and it was just way too much fun to have.
Yeah.
So were you weren't the DM for that, right?
I was not. No.
Okay.
No, we had another guy who does his own podcasts and has done some stuff elsewhere, but he was one of our resident nerds.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring something in here just kind of at the end, because I know this is a podcast about kind of the Christian arts. And for those of us, who maybe grew up in the 80s, where D&D was part of the Satanic Panic. And,
Yes.
where, it's like, I think there's still an air of like, is this a thing that people of faith can do? Mm-hmm. I think there's still a question there. And I would say that as maybe an urge to at least consider it, to maybe go shopping for that game, is the power that an RPG has to allow you to embody a particular person, or even specifically in something like D&D, an archetype. Mm-hmm. There are tons of RPGs out there. The lion's share of them are fantasy RPGs. Right. Now, that is most probably because our mythic age is the Middle Ages. In the same way that for the Middle Ages, the classical age was their age of mythology.
Oh, okay.
And it was where they drew all of their inspiration for imagination and creation and artistry. And for us, that's the Middle Ages.
Okay.
It is the mythic background to our modern civilization. And what D&D, I don't think it's an accident that D&D happened, because it's the first RPG. I don't think it's an accident that it was a fantasy RPG. There's a medieval fantasy RPG, because it allows us to draw on these deep archetypes. Mm-hmm. The brave knight, the wise cleric, and the subtle wizard. Mm-hmm. And embodying that is something that I think is deeply, almost metaphysical. It's definitely symbolic. Mm-hmm. You're saying, for a moment, I'm not me. I am me as maybe I could have been or might have been, and I have to do things that this version of me would do.
Do you think that's where some of that, because some of the words you're using, like, I can hear someone who's afraid of Dungeons and Dragons going metaphysical and embody someone else. Wouldn't that be possession? So like...
It just means acting.
I know what it means. I'm just saying, like, those would be like words that
would trigger.
That would, right. And so do you
Christian
think that's
Karens.
part? Right. So, I mean, as someone who, I was in high school in the middle of the 80s, and it was demonized, literally.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I don't think anyone ever told me it was about the Middle Ages, which you would think that would be obvious. But I got the negative press prior to getting anything accurate, similar to what happened when I was a young homeschooling mom and Harry Potter came out, and I was sure that was the same. It was anyway. So do you think that's partly what made people afraid of it, is because they misunderstood, like, become this other character, what that really meant?
Well, and I think even in the history of D&D, I don't think even the people who invented it really knew what was going on. Like, there's lots of stuff from the beginning that, like, they had no idea what they had just made, and it took them years to figure out what it was that they had done. But the thing is, I belong to a traditional branch of Christianity, and traditional Christianity still embraces this idea of, especially in worship, stepping into a role, right? So you take the place of the choir in heaven when you are singing.
Right.
Like in Catholic theology, the priest serves as an alter Christus, right? Another Christ.
Right.
And we are a post-traditional Christian culture. But I think the need to step into the role of something is deeply embedded in human psychology. And you go to other places in the world, places that have developed differently or in different paths than us, and you see people put on these big masks and dance around the fire, or stand outside the village and shake, these big bells to warn the spirits away. And they're wearing these terrible, frightening masks, right? And like you said, Jim the farmer, not right now.
Right.
He's taken on a role.
Okay.
And he's doing this to be part of the society and to protect the society. And we don't do that as much anymore. But this gives us an opportunity to be brave in a really interesting way. I remember specifically, and then I'll shut up about this, but I remember specifically a friend of mine played a very roguish character. And he found himself in a situation where he had taken, in a panic to get out of a sticky situation, he had taken on the identity of a lord. And just to kind of get out of Dodge and get away from everything. And then he and the rest of the group got back to the village, and the Lord's people were in trouble. There were invaders, and he and the rest of the group should have just hightailed it out of there. And they never did. And I gave them every opportunity to do so. They're like, no, I don't think, I'm worried about this, and I don't want to leave them here for this. Like, the winter's coming in. I don't think they're ready.
Aw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have many stories like that. And that's, again, you can't get that anyplace else.
It's kind of character building in a different way. You know what I mean? I was just thinking while you were talking about the mythology and the people wearing the masks and dancing, or even that makes me think of the traditions that Halloween comes from.
Yeah.
And I think we are so out of touch with symbolism right now that
It's hard for us to see it. Yeah.
it's not a language, a format that we're familiar with. Seeing something as representative, as having deeper meaning, like exercising that imaginative piece that really, brings depth to everything, but it's already in the framework of our society. We just have forgotten.
We don't know how to see it.
We don't know how to see it.
Yeah.
And so we fear it.
Yes, so we fear it, which is, kind of some of the Christian traditions that we are familiar with, just kind of missing the rich symbolism that is behind that.
Right.
Well, good horror depends on not identifying the monster. We're always afraid of the thing you can't see.
Yeah.
And symbolism allows you to see differently.
Yeah. Well, and something like you were saying with the party that chose to do the right thing, that has in common with horror, which, a friend of ours has talked about. Horror is one of the last genres where evil is very clear and you are rooting for good.
Good. Yep.
You are rooting for the people to survive, to vanquish evil, kill the monster, and there's something deeply healthy about us, remembering and calling evil and fighting it.
My all-time favorite RPG is actually a horror RPG. My favorite rule set.
Yeah, and that would, of course, terrify our mom from the 80s or 90s,
Yeah. So, well, I feel like I've monopolized the conversation, but this is something that I think about a lot. I want people to experience this. And again, if they, come and say, you know what, opera's just not for me. Okay.
Yeah.
But try a couple things before you say no.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, things are winding down at the Anselm Digital Pub. The fire is down to embers. The customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of Anselm Society. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time.